Legendary Military Aircraft by Jesse Clark. Airplanes have only been around for a little over a century, but they have a history as storied as nearly any other invention in the history of the world. There's a reason for that too: their military value is hard to overestimate. Therefore, like other weapons systems, their advancement has been supercharged by the billions upon endless billions of dollars that the militaries of the world have poured into them. You can thank our collective desire to not be killed by the other side for the fact that we went from Kitty Hawk biplanes to the surface of the moon in the span of a single human lifetime and didn't stop there. From dogfighters to bombers and gunships to choppers to medivac transports to reconnaissance craft, here's our take on some of the greatest warplanes that ever flew. 9. Supermarine Spitfire. In some ways, WW2 functioned as a giant pressure cooker for R&D, forcing combatants to pour resources into a never-ending bid to one-up the enemy and seize, or keep, the edge. By the end of the war in the skies, the first jet fighters were in operation, and it was possible to flatten a city with a fleet of bombers that could blot out the sun. But very few of these later warplanes managed to eclipse the grace, rugged effectiveness and sleek style of the RAF Supermarine Spitfire. The Spitfire, developed in 1936 and mass-produced beginning in 1938, was a single-seat interceptor fighter that outshone the more numerous RAF Hawk or Hurricane during the Battle of Britain, July-October 1940, and went on to become the main workhorse of the RAF for the rest of the war, serving in a wide variety of roles including photo reconnaissance. This beloved plane's outer shell rarely changed, but it proved more than capable of handling increasingly powerful engine variants that bolstered its performance greatly and lengthened its usability in service. Like many of the war's most reliable weapons, its use continued after the end of the conflict and into the 1950s and beyond. The Irish Air Forces used it until 1961. Today, enthusiasts still fly the remaining active 60, and many others, lacking engines, serve as popular museum exhibits. 8. Focke-Wulf 190. This single-seat, single-engine fighter, wielded by the German Luftwaffe during World War II, was the bane of Allied existence in the early years of the war. At high enough altitudes it was vulnerable to interceptors, but at low and medium altitudes it outclassed even the RAF's aforementioned Spitfire in everything but turn radius, that is, until the Brits released the Mark X variant. On the Eastern Front, the FW-190 found rapid early success against undergunned, obsolete Soviet fighters, many of which were caught with their pants down on the ground anyway. Most of the German fighter aces of the war primarily flew this fighter, but it wasn't just for dogfights. The plane's mighty 801 BMW radial engine made it ideal for both day and nighttime sorties, bomber escorts, and round-the-clock raids on enemy ground forces. It is widely considered to be one of the best fighter aircraft of the entire war. 7. B-29 Superfortress. Featuring state-of-the-art technology like an early computer-powered turret firing system and a pressurized cabin, and with a price tag of $3 billion, $43 billion today, the mass production of this four-engine American behemoth was the most ambitious and expensive weapons project of the entire Second World War, beating the cost of the Manhattan Project by a full billion. It delivered in spades too. Neither the Germans nor the Japanese had an adequate answer to the sky-darkening fleets of these monsters that could pound a major city into rubble in a matter of hours and return for seconds in only a few more. Silver plate B-29 variants, stripped of all but the rearmost turret guns to lighten the weight, were even hand-picked by Captain Paul Tibbets for a special mission towards the end of the war in the Pacific. In August 1945, a superfortress of this class, named Enola Gay, delivered the first atomic bomb to Hiroshima, effectively ending the war and ushering in the atomic age. 6. Me-262. It arrived too late to change the tide of World War II in favor of the Germans, but not too late to spook the Allies and change aviation history forever. The Messerschmitt Me-262, nicknamed Schwalbe, Swallow, was the world's first operational jet fighter. It was designed in the pre-war years, but production issues and the prioritization of other projects ensured it didn't take off or enter active service until April 1944, when the Luftwaffe was already a smoking shell of its former self. Still, it knocked nearly 600 Allied planes out of the sky before V-Day, and, in much the same way the American Civil War's ironclads instantly made wooden warships obsolete, ended the age of propeller-driven, single-wing aircraft only a few years after those had fully replaced biplanes. The Allies had no answer to this, although the British did debut the jet-powered Meteor in 1945, but had enough resources to simply bomb the Me-262s and the factories that produced them on the ground, limiting their effectiveness on a strategic scale, which was already severely hampered by late-war shortages of fuel and pilots. When the victorious Allied powers had time to build new planes after the war, though, you better believe all the effort went into the production of jets. We have the Me-262 to thank for that. 5. MiG-21. Like the AK-47, also designed by the Soviet Union in the Cold War era, the cheap production cost and rugged, all-around power of the Mikoyan-Gurevich MiG-21 made it one of the most widely used and longest-lasting supersonic jet fighters in world history. Decades after its inaugural flight, variants of it continued to serve many nations that were once under the Soviet sphere of influence, and many, like India, that weren't. During the Vietnam War, the MiG-21 became a maddening thorn in the side of the U.S. Air Force, which relied on the more advanced but more cumbersome F-4 Phantom. In one pass then haul-ass hit-and-run tactics, North Vietnamese pilots would ambush American formations with MiGs and bolt before the U.S. could strike back. The MiG continues to be used in conflicts around the world, such as the Six-Day War, 1967, between Israel and an Arab coalition, the Iran-Iraq War, and various African conflicts around the Horn. It was even still in use in the Libyan and Syrian wars in the last decade. Its performance relative to other aircraft has diminished as technology has improved, obviously, but its long service history is a testament to its engineering. 4. UH-1. This helicopter had humble enough origins. In the 1950s, the U.S. Army required a simple medical evacuation general utility chopper and chose the Bell 204, a single-shaft, turbine-powered craft with a two-blade main rotor, out of 20 competing designs. Add simple enough upgrades to counter the Bell's initial cabin space and power issues, and you have the HU-1, a simple, easily customizable workhorse that can serve as everything from its initial design functions as a medical transport copter to an aggressive gunship. The Army called it the Iroquois. Its crews and the ground forces alongside which it saw action, though, dragged out its HU-1 designation with an affectionate nickname, the Huey. If ever there was a more iconic chopper, we've yet to encounter it. In fact, we know it's the most iconic design of all time due simply to the fact that it's the first thing anyone thinks about when they hear the word helicopter at all. 3. SR-71. It began as a Black, highly classified project ordered by the U.S. military and carried out by Lockheed, Pre-Martin, and its Skunk Works division. Then,